Good morning, Crossridge. Hope you're doing well on this beautiful Monday morning. Now, whether you are at home like myself, enjoying a day off or some time with the kids, or whether you have gone into work today, I hope that you will join me as we quickly look back and recap yesterday's sermon, as Pastor Lee took us through the passage we find in Genesis chapter 21. And the title of our entire sermon series so far has been Between Promise and Fulfillment. And now in chapter 21, we see the beginning in Abraham's life of the fulfillment of God's promise that he would make his descendants as numerous as the stars, starting with one in the birth of Isaac. And what we can see in this chapter is that God is faithful in fulfilling his promises. God keeps his word to us, and that should instill in us both confidence and willful obedience and praise of God when we see that he has done the things that he has said to us to do, whether it's in the story of Abraham or many of the biblical stories or God's own faithfulness in our own lives. We should be responding in a willing obedience, a thankful and grateful obedience to the one who has made us and sustained us and kept his word to us. Then Lee went on to go into the second point of this passage that he drew our eyes to, which was that God is able to sort out the complicated mess that is our lives. While we wait on God's promises, while we wait on his absolute faithfulness, often we can get lost in our own sin and our own wrong choices, as perhaps like Abraham, we try and force our own promises through Abraham taking Sarah's slave woman Hagar and having a child with her, which ultimately we also see in this chapter leading to some larger problems. God is faithful in the midst of that. It is not us. Our lives are a mess. Sin comes in, our own faithlessness and disobedience comes in, and we wreck our worship and our relationship with him. But that is not too much for God, because he is gracious and he is merciful. And that was the last sub point that Lee drew our attention to, is that God's grace is enough for everyone. And he talked about this idea of common grace as well as his own specific grace into our lives. And we see that in the work of Jesus on the cross, where there is a grace abounding to those who call on the name of God, much like the relationship that God indeed had with Abraham. None of us are perfect, but God is perfect. Again, our confidence is in him, and his grace is certainly enough for all of us as he meets us in our own distress, whether that is in a specific situation or maybe just right now in this situation that we're dealing with in the entire world, where the world is distressed and out of order and mismanaged, and we don't know what's going on. God is in that. He is over that. He is through that, and he will work his good promises and his good will to ultimately draw humanity to himself. So I hope you enjoyed that, Crossridge. I hope you've really enjoyed this sermon series that Lee has been going through and that we have been walking through together. I ask you to continue reading this amongst yourselves, with your family, with your kids, with your youth. Go into God's word, dig in deeper as we look this week to finishing off chapter 21 and moving on as well. Pray that you are all well. Pray that you are all healthy and continuing to trust in our wonderful God.